For much of a half-century, from 1960 to 2010, both Singapore and Hong Kong were always neck to neck in terms of gross domestic product, GDP, per capita output. Here's a graph from the Penn World Table published in 2021. The data shows that the GDP per capita of Hong Kong was even higher than that of Singapore from 1960 to 2005 for most of the years. At one point, in 1997, Hong Kong's GDP per capita even stood at over $43,060 as compared to Singapore's $27,838. This difference was enormous and showcased just how far Hong Kong was compared to Singapore. Yet, if we take a look at the latest years from 2010 to 2019, the picture has rapidly changed. Singapore has outpaced Hong Kong by huge margins. As a matter of fact, a separate data published by the World Bank even paints a darker picture. As you can see in the graph in the latest year available in 2022, Singapore's GDP per capita stood at over $108,036, while Hong Kong was just $58,479. The World Bank data, however, also shows that Singapore's per capita was much higher than that of Hong Kong since the latest available data of 1990. Despite that, Hong Kong back in the 1990s wasn't this behind compared to Singapore. It was only until recently that Hong Kong had fallen behind. Here's another dataset published by the World Bank showing the gross domestic product itself. From the early 1970s to 2009, Hong Kong's GDP was higher than Singapore. In 1997, Hong Kong's GDP was nearly twice that of Hong Kong. They had over $177 billion, while Singapore only had $100 billion. But as the data shows, Singapore went on to overtake Hong Kong starting in 2010, and even further in the latest year of 2023. Singapore's GDP now stands at over $501 billion, while Hong Kong trailing at only $382 billion. Now, this graph doesn't depict that Hong Kong's economy isn't growing at all. It is growing. Here's a graph that showcases the annual GDP growth of both nations. It is here that we can see how Singapore overtakes Hong Kong rapidly. Singapore, since 2003, has been staging stronger annual GDP growth every single year. In 2022, the difference was even tremendous as Singapore recorded a GDP growth of over 3.8%, while Hong Kong recorded a contraction of 3.7%. So, it's a mystery that Hong Kong, once hailed as one of the world's best financial hubs, to be overtaken by Singapore, a country that has also been regarded as a financial hub but had trailed far behind Hong Kong previously. So, how did Singapore beat Hong Kong? A country that had strong access to China's economy, which has staged explosive growth over the past few decades. Well, it is quite difficult to pinpoint just one cause. It's a mix of factors, including things like economic and political structure differences to social instability, and even Hong Kong's dependence on China. The first important reason here is the national security law. Back in 2019, there were massive protests in Hong Kong. As a response, the Chinese government implemented the national security law in 2020. This law criminalizes acts deemed as secession, subversion, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces, with severe penalties, including life imprisonment. Its role was intended to restore order, but its introduction brought unintended consequences that have reshaped the business environment in Hong Kong. Many residents and businesses see the NSL as eroding the city's autonomy, as it grants mainland Chinese authorities greater power to interfere in Hong Kong's legal and political systems. Many analysts said that this had a severe effect on freedom of speech, press, and assembly, values that were previously integral to Hong Kong's global appeal. For example, news outlets and non-governmental organizations have either shut down or moved operations elsewhere to avoid potential legal repercussions. This restrictive environment has raised concerns among international corporations and financial institutions that rely on a free flow of information and minimal government interference for effective decision-making. As a result, Hong Kong's attractiveness as a business hub is waning. According to recent data, several multinational corporations have scaled back their operations or chosen alternative locations, with Singapore often emerging as the top substitute. The exodus of foreign companies has also been accompanied by a flight of local businesses and professionals who feel uneasy about their future in the city. One of the most visible impacts of the NSL has been a sharp outflow of talent from Hong Kong. Skilled professionals, including expatriates and locals, have left the city in search of safer and more predictable environments. This brain drain is particularly concerning for industries like finance, technology, and education, where a high level of expertise is essential. Between 2020 and 2023, it is estimated that around 291,000 people left Hong Kong, a significant portion of whom were professionals critical to sustaining the city's economy. But these problems were only seen around 2019 and 2020. If you take a look at the graph here, one can have two causes for the economic slowdown of Hong Kong, both because of the NSL, but also because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Another major problem was the US-China tensions. Hong Kong stands as a bridge between mainland China and the rest of the world. Tensions between the two economic leaders made it especially vulnerable to the consequences of escalating US-China tensions. The trade war initiated under the Trump administration imposed tariffs and export restrictions on Chinese goods, impacting Hong Kong's trade-reliant economy. As a re-export hub for goods between China and other global markets, Hong Kong faced reduced demand, especially for high-tech products, where US sanctions were most stringent. Here's a graph of Hong Kong's total exports of goods and services. In nearly every year prior to the Trump presidency, Hong Kong's total export value has continuously gone up. But just take a look at what happened in 2018, a year after Trump had been president. Hong Kong's total export value had dropped. In comparison, Singapore's total export value had risen tremendously fast. Of course, the trade war wasn't the only answer for this cause, but it's one of the important reasons out there. Foreign direct investment, FDI, is another reason. FDI has always been an integral part of Hong Kong's long-term growth. However, due to the US-China tensions and Hong Kong's perceived political shift towards Beijing, have caused some investors to reconsider Hong Kong as an FDI destination. Here's a graph by the World Bank for the foreign direct investment net inflows in balance of payments in Hong Kong. As you can see, investment inflows had been volatile, and in 2018 and 2019, FDI had declined from 2016 and 2017 levels. In comparison, just take a look at the FDI net inflows in Singapore. Singapore's FDI net inflows had trailed behind Hong Kong from 2000 to 2018. But come 2019 and beyond, Hong Kong's net FDI inflows have fallen. Again, one of the reasons for this was because of the US-China tensions and also the NSL. One of the most interesting aspects about Hong Kong's economy is that its currency is pegged to the US dollar, and traditionally it has been a source of stability, maintaining confidence in the city's monetary policy. However, the peg now poses challenges in the high interest rate environment created by US Federal Reserve policies. In case you're not aware of it, here's a graph of the US interest rate. Over the past few years, it has risen fast. This was because the country was battling an inflation rate and its monetary authorities wanted to bring it down. But as the US raises interest rates to combat inflation, Hong Kong must follow suit. The problem here, however, is that Hong Kong wasn't fighting inflation. Here's a graph of the US inflation rate, and you can clearly see just how fast it jumped. But then, if you take a look at the Hong Kong inflation rate, you don't see a big jump at all. As a matter of fact, the inflation rate is even lower than it was prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite that, Hong Kong's authorities had still raised interest rates to levels last seen since 2007. This misalignment puts additional pressure on businesses and consumers in Hong Kong as borrowing costs increase and economic growth is constrained. The fixed exchange rate also limits Hong Kong's ability to engage in independent monetary policy, leaving it vulnerable to external financial shocks. Comparatively, Singapore's flexible exchange rate policy allows it to respond more dynamically to global economic changes. This flexibility has helped Singapore maintain lower interest rates than Hong Kong during challenging times, making it a more attractive destination for business and investment. The future of Hong Kong is quite uncertain, but there are still a lot of reasons why it can continue to become a leading financial hub. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.